Right. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Welcome to our first eConference of 2024. It has been, last time I checked, I think 9 months since the previous eConference. And so when we pull these out of storage, you know it's for a good reason. And today is one of two town halls that we're holding on environmental and climate issues underneath the dome. We've got a great team that has been collaborating the last few months on sort of larger projects and larger initiatives to help domes around the world uh, teach climate and environmental topics better. But even before we get to that point, a sense of just figuring out what the environment, if you will, looks like in domes around the world for these sorts of topics. What are the obstacles you're running into? What are the opportunities that you found? Where are the limitations on resources and content and things of that sort? And so it's currently a collaboration between the International Planetarium Society, IPS, Astronomers for Planet Earth, the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, and the team at the California Academy of Sciences out in San Francisco, California, USA. And we have representatives from all of those groups in this conference, eConference, and we'll have more in the eConference later today. But we also have some invited guests, people to help kick off this dialogue and give a little bit of background into what they and their institutions are doing. For this early e-conference, we have Anna Green from the Stiftung Planetarium Berlin. You probably know her from other e-conferences, long German words. She's hosting IPS 2024, this little thing, and she'll be representing the team from Berlin. And then from the Ars Electronica Future Lab, we have Susanne Kiesenhofer, Anna and Susan. Suzanne? It's Suzanne? Or okay, perfect. Want to make sure you got all that. So with that, I'm going to pin both of you here in the very beginning so that everyone can see. And now I'm randomly searching for Anna, who has now disappeared on my screen. So there she is. Perfect. And would just love to have the two of you here at the beginning introduce yourselves, your institutions, and sort of a very brief background into climate and environmental topics that you've done, shows, presentations, curated materials, and then as we move through the remainder of the e-conference, we of course would like to turn it over to all of you in the audience and have that conversation, getting feedback from all of you about what it is like right now teaching environmental and climate topics in your dome. So with that, Anna, I will turn the floor over to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, as Michael said, Anna Green, either way you want to pronounce it's fine with me. Yeah, and I'm here representing my organization, the Stiftung Planetarium Berlin, which in English for you is the Foundation of Berlin Planetariums. So we actually have 3 permanent planetariums, 2 observatories, and like 2.5 mobile domes as well. So we try to be present in the community as much as possible, as well as having the community come to us. And for us, sustainability is a big thing. We're teaching people about space, and you can't teach people about space and astronomy without talking about where we live, planet Earth. And our Earth is in a crisis right now. And that's very important to help the young people understand that they can play a part in making things better, and helping older people like me and above to understand that there's still a part we can play as well. That hopefully not all is lost, and that we can make things better. So we actually do several things. For a couple of years now, we've had a program called Unser blauer Planet, which is our blue planet. And it is all about ecology. We talk about things like the jet stream, water cycle, how the rainforest works, why it's so important, deforestation, and we kind of get into how humans have been changing the Earth, how things are changing. And of course, that starts to get a little heavy. And so at the very end, then we talk about how can we fix things? How can we make things better? How can we as individuals help with sustainability? And what can we do on a greater scale to help with that as well? On top of that, there's a climate conference in Berlin that for the last several years we've been having here. They bring it to us and we are the hosting building, shall I say, but we take part with them in this climate conference. And it's a bunch of young people who put this climate conference on and talk about things that are important to them. We have politicians that come for it. Excuse me. And then there's also now a Umweltfestival or climate festival. And since last year, we've been bringing the Mobile Dome to there, and we show climate shows there. The people come in, sit in the Mobile Dome, get to have that experience, learn a little bit more about climate change from us and what they can do. And it was extremely popular last year, and they asked us to come back again this year. So we'll be back hopefully with a new version of the program, so that the people who came last year will have something a little new. And on top of that, we just try to be as sustainable ourselves as we can, and doing our part as best we can, where we can, and when we can.
Thank you, Anna. Susanne, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Susanne from the Ars Electronica. The Ars Electronica is an institution in Linz that consists of several parts. So I'm here at the Future Lab. We are sort of the R&D department. And then there's the Ars Electronica Center, which is the museum. And it is sort of like the museum of the future. And it has changing exhibitions, which also right now we have an exhibition that is called There Is No Planet B, which deals with new or like innovative solutions that might lead us, or like pieces of solutions that might lead us to fighting the climate change battle. But we also have a projection space, which is called the Deep Space. So we have this interactive wall and floor projection. It's 16 by 9 meters, both wall and floor. And we have several ways of interaction in there. And we at the Future Lab, we amongst other things also produce games and content for this interactive space. And one of these games or applications is called Welcome to Planet B, which also is the reason why I'm invited here, because I was the project lead in this project. And just to give you maybe a quick look, if it's all right, I would share my screen. So there's this huge projection space, and the application Welcome to Planet B was sort of an answer to the exhibition There Is No Planet B. So we would invite the people to come into the projection space and pretend like this is a fake planet. Like we have a planet where we can try things out, test theories, would that work? And then in like the concept was, and then afterwards people go out back to planet A and actually implement these changes. And this game works based on real data. So we really try to replicate our world, mainly with Austrian data, so as to keep it less complex. And the group then has different topics where they could decide on changes. And it was very black and white. It's really, we either do A or we do B, and we have to make democratic decisions. So we try to bring all the difficult topics into this game. Like, for example, it is very difficult to come to a consensus of what we could do. We never have all the data to make an informed decision. Like there's always things we could not consider before, we didn't know, we weren't aware of. So this is something that also happens in this game. Then there's always a countdown to give you this stressful thing of we need to act now. And also in this game, the worst you could do is do nothing. So we track the people, we track their position in space. And by positioning for one of these characters, they present their possible solutions. You make your stand, so to say. And by that, we also wanted to create a discussion platform. So you really you stand opposite of the people who are of a different opinion, and then you can start a discussion like, why do you stand here? And we have 5 topics based on the areas of life that produce the most CO2 emissions. So it's energy and industry, it's mobility, it's housing, and waste and then also nutrition. And the more, like, some topics are very personal, where you really feel like this is getting people out of their comfort zone to make a decision in that area. Like, this is where you can see energy. It's not so personal. Like, I can easily make a decision, but some topics are very personal, and you really get to that point where you're like, I don't want either of these choices, and you have this difficult dilemma situation. And you start to discuss, like, and it's also very interesting to see that with different groups of people. For example, it makes a big difference if people are from Austria playing this game or people from Japan playing this game. They come to very different democratic decisions. And then in the end, you can travel into the future. Everything is based on the IPCC scenarios. You can travel into the future in the year 2100, and you see if you've actually made it, if you have reduced the emissions enough to keep in an area that is below 2 degrees. Everything is calculated on real data. And we developed this together with the climate institution in Linz and with some sustainability experts. And the idea is to also involve this in a whole experience. Like, before you go into the exhibition, there is no Planet B. Then after this deep space presentation, you can also take part in a workshop where you're more focused on real solutions. Like, this is very black and white, it's not gonna be that easy in the real world. And in the workshop, you can really focus on what are actual solutions that we can implement that are just pieces that we need to put together. And then we also developed a children's book, which is like a little pop-up book to make this topic more accessible to children, because it's very complex. And the deep space also, the deep space presentation is also quite complex. So it's mainly aimed at students from 12 years up. So this book was more for the younger audience. So we tried to make this whole experience in the museum to fit everything together to an experience where you can really take away something. So it's more aimed for groups that are willing to really delve into the topic. It's not so much for a leisure afternoon with your family and friends. It's more really to get deeper into the topic and to spark some really serious discussions where it's really not like we don't present solutions or anything. We just build the platforms so that people can have an informed discussion. Yeah,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Excellent. So Susanne and Anna here at the beginning, thank you both for the introductions into what your institutions do, both in Berlin and Susanne, it's in Linz, correct? Austria?
Yes.
Yes.
Austria, yeah.
And of course, one of the reasons that we're having two of these e-conferences today is that one was at a time in which we could get much more European and rest of world collaboration. And then we, of course, have one a little later in the day. It's a little bit better for North and South America. And when we always talk about North America, and specifically the United States, the idea of climate and environmental issues is controversial in many, many places. But it's also an opportunity for us in this setting to have both of you speak to what has the public audience reaction been in how they're interacting, Anna, in your case, in the domes and at the outreach, and Susanne, for you at the Future Lab. What has been the sense that you've gotten from audiences about not just the topics, but about how you are implementing these sorts of like educational outreaches? And Anna, I'll go to you first.
We've gotten really good feedback. We've done some refining of the show since it first premiered, of course. But overall, we do actually take the Unser Blauer Planet to the schools as well. And it's one of our most requested programs in the schools. I've had some schools say that's the only show we can do because they specifically want a climate and ecology is the word in English, themed show. And some of them, they do it specifically because they're getting money from the government to specifically have that topic covered as well. So the government actually is also giving the schools a little bit of a push to help with that too, which is really cool as an American here to see that kind of support. And like I said, when we did the climate festival, we had a child cry because the line was so long that they got cut off before they could get into the dome, and they had to wait for the next show, and the parent didn't want to wait, and the mobile dome could only hold so many people, and it was already really, really full in there. And so we I mean, it was every single show was packed, max capacity. People wanted to see it, they wanted to know more. We were getting questions afterwards. And that's one of the things that I love about this program too, is we always get people conversing with us afterwards, wanting to know more. And one of the elements that I didn't mention that's in this program in particular is because our foundation is under the Senate here for education, youth and family. And so we are very much in that education area. We're supported by the government for that as well. And so our focus is on that educational element. So to specifically for Berlin and somewhat into the Brandenburg area as well. And so because of that, we do want to bring in that local element too. And so we do talk about, what things look like here when there's a drought. What does it look like in the farmlands in Brandenburg? How does that affect us? We've had some talk in the last couple of years here in the Berlin-Brandenburg area about, hey, how bad is this drought going to be? Are we going to have to start doing water rationing? Are people not going to be allowed to fill their swimming pools and their, small garden allotments? How is this going to affect everyone? So it's really cool to have not just the children, but also if their parents are with them, if it's a festival or something like that, to have them come up to us and want to know more. What can we do? What are the little things we can do? What are the big things we can do? Should we write to our senator that works everywhere in the world, I think? And just seeing the discussion continue with us after the program, inside or outside the dome, and knowing that they're continuing that discussion after they've talked to us too. They're bringing that discussion home. They're having that discussion with their friends. And that's so, so important. The more people that they talk to, the better.
Susanne, to you.
Yeah, I think it's only my guess that at least for us, it's very, people are very informed already. We also do, we try to make every presentation interactive, of course. So we have a lot of guessing questions also in between, what would you think is the main factor, etc. People are very aware of the issues and also the data in Austria. But also it's always very interesting how actually as a presenter, you learn so much from the audience because they come up with new solutions. We try to take the most dilemma ones, the ones that are most discussed in the news. We try to use these as possible solutions and discuss what would that mean if we implemented that. But it's also that the audience often comes with, but why don't you choose this as a solution? Or why don't we make it like that? And so this is this whole new meta level that happens when we do a presentation, because we also learn a lot. There's constantly new ideas and new possible solutions, and people shared them with us. And also it's really interesting that you find out the comfort zones of people, what they're willing to do. And we often think, oh, people would never do that, there's also been a recent study that we all perceive that the society is not willing to make changes, but this is not true. People are really they would give up so much if it was asked of them, or if they would see that this would help in any way. For example, in the mobility options, you could either just use public transport and not have your own car, but have a climate or a CO2 counter. Or you could have, the CO2 counter is you have your own car, but it is electric, for example. And people, so many, it depends on the group, of course, but so many are willing to be okay, I don't have my own vehicle anymore. I'm fine if we I don't know, make those changes, or we tax individual transportation so highly that I'm really motivated to choose that. Or oftentimes people say, I already don't have a car, like I'm already in this sector. So it's very interesting. And I think that's one of the most important factors to make it visible to the people, that there's already so much, like people are so willing to make changes, and you don't feel so alone anymore if you see that. And I think just to make it visible to the audience has a big effect also, especially in that group if they fairly know each other, like at workplaces, like if a work group comes, then it's really beneficial for them to see that. And of course for us also. But of course, if it's a very diverse group who have never seen each other, the effects are different. But yeah, in general, we have made the experience that people are very informed, and they're really very willing to discuss and to be confronted with uncomfortable facts. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both. With that, I hope that there's a little inspiration from Anna and Susanne this morning, but also opening it up to everyone else here. This is a town hall for that reason. If you are willing to share, what have been some of the opportunities that you've had with climate and environment topics in the Dome? And of course, in Germany and in Austria, seemingly the reception is very, very good, and there is a lot of an informed audience that may be less so in other parts of the world. And if you have run into that and sort of the obstacles that have emerged in your effectively teaching climate and environment topics, we'd love to hear those as well. So if you'd like to, just go on ahead and raise your hand in the Zoom status area, and we'll be able to call on everyone and kind of use that as a way to keep things flowing smoothly for us today. That said, we may also just start right off with Ryan Wyatt.
I did want to add real quick, though, that my experience here is the Berlin-Brandenburg area. So it may be that if I were to go to somewhere more rural, Bayern or Saarland or something like that, into another state, it might be I might be taken differently. That I cannot attest to. I would hope it would not be. I would hope it'd be the same reception that we get here in Berlin. But just like in the United States or in Canada with the provinces, every place you go has its own culture and its own makeup of people, and what they understand and what they're willing to learn and what you're able to bring to them. So
absolutely. Ryan, we'll go to you, and then Adam afterward.
Well, I was actually curious. I was going to ask, I think maybe it's more for you, Suzanne, but for both of you, like, how do you train presenters to deal with these topics, both from maybe a content perspective, but also in terms of the engagement that they're having with audience members? Like Suzanne, I think you said there can lead to some difficult conversations or kind of difficult questions for people. So if you have someone presenting and even answering questions afterward, do you help them with any kind of training, or have you found skill sets particularly useful for this kind of presentation?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it is kind of a difficult topic, especially since people are very opinionated, and it can add to this difficult group dynamic. So one trick that we do, so to say, is that this is planet B. Like, and also we have characters presenting the options. So we can always say, this is not my opinion. I'm not presenting a solution, but these people living there, these characters that you see in that world, they make this statement. They think this is a good idea. Especially, for example, in the energy area, we have nuclear energy is one of the options. So for us in Austria, that's a topic like no Austrian would ever choose that. But we can say, like, this is raised by this person, and it's not my opinion, it's not our opinion. This makes it a bit easier. And also you can always say, I know the real world is not as black and white. Like, I know this is very simplified, but this is planet B. Just do a thought experiment. Just be like, what if I go on the nuclear position? It's not your planet, it's planet B. You can try things out. You can watch what happens, because then actually the world changes, everything moves, nuclear plants are being built, like you can see, and it's all in 3D. So it's like you're really in this world. You can be like a bit encouraging to dare new things and to discover together. That helps, I think. But also, I really have to say our presenters are very well trained. They're very interested in these topics as well. And we give them all the data that we worked on, and they inform themselves, and they can also add their own knowledge or current events that are happening. They're totally free to do the presentation as they want. And they're also free to choose the topics, because it's very time limited. It's only 30 minutes and you can't do all 5 topics. And if they don't feel comfortable with one of them, they can decide, like, I just do mobility with this group, or you can also sense, or you can ask the group what they would feel more comfortable with. And for the discussions to be really open, and also like, this is not our institutional point. We're all in this together. We're not saying this is a solution. We're not solving anything. We just want to start the discussion and always pick up solutions that they're saying, like to bring that forward and to appreciate that. And also to forward them to the workshop where we're actually doing real work, so to say. Yeah, that's, and it is opening a discussion, so that should always be the main goal, to give everyone space to say their opinion. Yeah.
That's similar for us. We, especially with the mobile dome when we're in schools, it's a much more intimate setting with a class. And so sometimes we do get discussion going on in the middle of the show, and we have that ability to just kind of pause and let the show go where it needs to, maybe more so than we would in our 23-meter dome, where we might have 300 people sitting in there. It's a little harder to have a discussion then. That's where the discussion comes afterwards, maybe. But we try to be as interactive within the show as possible with the people and give them that space. And especially afterwards, we invite people to come talk to us afterwards. We also, for our moderators, so our moderators, we only have a few people from the Stiftung proper who do moderation or presentation, I guess, of the shows. The rest of our moderators are freelancers. And we have a large pool of freelancers, which is great. But we work with them. We do double moderation with them until they're ready to work by themselves. And we have a wiki for our moderators. And so all of the scripts for the shows are in there, so they can read those ahead of time. Some of them even have videos, so they can see somebody else presenting the show ahead of time. And then we have tips for them, whether it be for every show. So tips for teaching, things they can help teachers with if teachers have questions, links they can send the teachers to, including if we have worksheets on our website, which we do for this particular program, and that kind of thing. So we try to give our moderators a little bit of help in case they get a tough question. And then one of the biggest things we always tell them is it's okay to say, I don't know. We want to model that too for the students and also just the public in general that we're working with. You can't know everything. No scientist knows everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. Let's find out together. And you can look up their question after the show, or say, yeah, I don't know, but my colleague I know is here. Let me call my colleague for you. It's okay to do that. So that's another device that we give our moderators to help them if a difficult question comes in.
Adam, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, nice and croaky to start off with. Hi, everyone. So I'm We the Curious, which is a science centre in Bristol in the UK. And I look after the planetarium there. Really interesting to hear what people have been talking about so far. I just thought I'd share some conversations we had with some 14, 15-year-olds last year. We ran a series of workshops and we asked the question, should we be exploring space when in this time of crisis, of wealth inequality, of climate crisis? And it was a really interesting discussion. But what came across immediately was this tremendous pessimism about the climate from these young people, and like this real sort of fatalism of like the world is already ruined. You older people did this. We've been preaching to young people, you've got to fix this for ages. But like this feeling that very feeling of disempowerment, I suppose. And, you know, hopefully we made some progress with those, you know, that small group of young people. But I was just interested if this is something that other people have come across a lot and how they've challenged that, because I think just purely telling people about the problem, we've done that for 20, 30 years, and it's hard. And also, I should say, like as a secondary note, that that was not in our dome. We went to the school for that. And one of the things that I'm also interested to hear from is that we're always thinking about climate. So when we write a planetarium show, we always try and have an angle on that at some point throughout the show. But we did have a climate focused planetarium show, or I suppose Earth focused planetarium show, and there is some at least internal pressure for me to write a new one because that one was discontinued. But I'm slightly intimidated by the challenge of doing that within the dome, and I think some of it is like the expectations of the public that it should be a space show. If you go to a planetarium, you want to see space. So I'm interested in that as well. So two very different things there, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on both of those.
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a great discussion. The idea of, well, first of all, the interaction is what I'm most interested in, audience interaction. Of course, anybody who knows me knows that. But when we're developing a program, I say I'm retired now, so I'm a little bit out of the loop. But I think when any show is developed anywhere, even a recorded show, you get together and you brainstorm ideas. And in an audience participation show, you brainstorm ideas for activities, things that the audience can do. And this works best in a small planetarium, but it works also in a large planetarium. I think that's been demonstrated fairly well, although not extensively. But the idea that there's a difficult questions, and what is actually happening to the Earth is depressing. And we've already gone, there's nothing we can do about what we've done so far, actually, but there are solutions. So I'm thinking I want to brainstorm activities with people about, and there's two areas where I would think I would want to brainstorm. One is to get people's knowledge about, what really is happening, that they're aware of the various things that are happening. But also, and along with that, to understand what the causes really are. I think a lot of people really don't understand that everything fossil fuel is contributing to this. And so one of the activities we do in classrooms, actually, I've done this more in classrooms than I have in a planetarium, but I think there's a lot of room for doing activities in the planetarium about it. One of the things we do is just get the idea of one activity that comes to mind is that what happens when the power goes out, and we're talking about electrical power here. What are the things in your home that wouldn't work? Okay. Well, that's not exactly what I have in mind for this idea. Although that's a very interesting one. But there could be an activity that's based on showing images of different things that are familiar everyday things, and which of these things actually rely on fossil fuels, and which of those actually emit greenhouse gases, because plastics don't emit, as far as I know. greenhouse gases, but most, anytime you burn things, they do. So that awareness, the connection of the problem with the, that fossil fuels are the problem, I think still a lot of people don't really get that. And if they don't, and if they do get it, they're not aware that how immersed we are in fossil fuel culture and society. A lot of people are not really aware of that. But then, of course, the most important thing that I think everybody here would agree with is that there needs to be activities about solutions. And that's what that your exhibit, Susanne, that's what that sounds like it's so very good at. And those are activities that are audience involved. And I'd be curious how that could be adapted inside a dome.
All right. Anyone else want to take the floor?
So, by the way, I put in the chat, I put a link. I'll put it in again for people who came late. But one of the first or second links on there, some links that are about solutions. One of them is kind of a game, which a lot of you may be aware of anyway, but it's exhaustive solutions, and a game where you implement different solutions and see how much that reduces our impact.
Right. Anybody else like to share, both to Adam's questions or to your own specific experiences? Carlos, go ahead.
Hi all. I'd like to share with you our experience with our new museum. We have a new exposition talking about life in general, the origin of life and the future of life. And in this case, we implement some experiences we discuss the climate change in other kind of the representations, because I think that the fundamental problem is the representation, how the people understand this kind of process, because it's a long time process. It's not a momentary process that you see all the time, and the change is permanent, and it's not so evident for the people. So we will have the COP16 this year in Colombia, in Cali, and we have a great effort to construct new narratives for this kind of discussion, because the problem is the panic communication, that I think that is not more significant for the people. But the real problem is clear in some countries like Peru, for example, and other countries where the problem is evident in the change of the acidification of the oceans and other stuffs, that it's not the evident way to say about the climate change. So we are trying to represent, to propose different representations for this problem in all the areas that the climate change is a problem, in ocean acidification, the loss of the biodiversity, and other stuff that is connected with that. So I think that the problem is how is an ethical problem and political problem and a representation problem for the people, for the public understanding of the phenomenon. All the stuff is connected with the phenomenon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carlos. Anyone else who's had obstacles to, I know seeing some of you in the room and where you are and knowing sort of the issues that have come up, both the obstacles in the sense of actually teaching the climate and environment topics, but also the very real obstacle of just not having the content or the means to produce the content, or finding the subject matter experts to help ensure that what you're teaching is accurate. Keeping that in mind, Alan, we'll go back to you.
I just forgot to mention something that addressed Adam's question. What do you do about people who expect it to be about space in a planetarium? There's a fairly easy way to connect the Earth with space because it's immersed in space. And that is to turn your viewpoint back on Earth. In other words, you can use special effects to go out into space. You can do, it's always fairly dramatic to view Earth, and then you can zoom in on Earth in various ways. So but I would totally recommend always showing stars during any planetarium show. If it means going out there and then coming back to Earth, still, you got to show the stars, and that will satisfy people in a very deep way.
Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alan. And I will say we did have that experience last year. We were asked to actually be at a geophysical conference in their vendor hall. And we were like, oh, great. Well, we'll bring Unser Blauer Planet because, this is in the wheelhouse of these people. They'll probably appreciate it. And instead they all left and they were like, well, we wanted to see stars. Why didn't we get to see constellations? And we were just kind of like, oh, we thought you'd like this. And they were like, yeah, we look at that every day. Like we know already. So that was an our bad. So I do agree, being able to at least have a little bit of the stars. And I have had also moments, because that program doesn't talk about constellations at all. And so there have been times where I've real quick at the end thrown up stars just so people can get their fix. I mentioned in the chat though that we do have, Planetarium, size groß Planetarium, size klein Planetarium, Planetarium am Insel Anna. The majority of our domes have planetarium in the name. But we do try to say, we're the most modern science theater in Europe. It's the intense mobile science theater. And so we try to get people, and some people then don't know what that means. And then we say, oh, well, we're a mobile planetarium and we offer many different subject areas from the different sciences that try to get that in their head. I also did want to throw out there too that there are still some domes out there that don't have full dome. So it's not always as easy for them to show these kinds of topics in a dynamic way. And having come from one of those domes and having one of those domes here still until April this year, it is a challenge. And looking back, we didn't do a whole lot of this kind of topic in one of my previous domes where we didn't have full dome. It is much harder. We'd have to do it with PowerPoint against a starry sky backdrop. So that's also something to think about. I don't know, probably everybody here has full dome and that's not an issue, but that's also maybe something for the domes out there who still don't have full dome. How can we support them? Sorry, I just took that completely off track, but.
No, but also seeing Susan, there's the obstacles of what you can present and what technology you have. And then as Marco is a fine example of this, and Susan heading up Portable Planetarium Committee for years, how there are the similarities and then these very stark differences between presenting these kind of topics in a fixed dome in a science center or a university. It's another thing if you're presenting this in a mobile dome where you may be in a community for the first time ever. And then how do we properly resource those individuals as well? Elspeth from NSC UK, I saw your hand up if you'd like to continue.
So obviously, because space is in our name, people really expect to see space in our domes. And we've not really had the best feedback when we've shown climate shows. But previously, so the way that our system works, everyone automatically gets a planetarium show. And it used to be assigned, so people didn't necessarily have the choice in going to see that show. We have changed recently and people are now getting the choice. So when they book in, they have an option of 3 different shows they can book into. So we're trying to bring back our climate show to see whether people will actually opt to go into it, rather than just, we hope that a lot of the bad press was that they were being forced to go into it, and they were expecting to see something about space, and hopefully now they will opt to go into it. But also, we're actually, our half-term theme this half-term is Venus, and we're actually using that to talk subtly about climate change. So we've got a demonstration on at the moment. It's not in the dome, it's just in the galleries, which we didn't think was going to work very well. We thought it was just going to be kind of just something we'd use this half term. We've got 2 fish bowls filled with different coloured pom-poms. One of them is Earth's atmosphere, one of them is Venus's atmosphere. People have to go fishing in Earth's atmosphere to find the carbon dioxide, which is the orange pom-pom. Then they look at Venus, which is full of orange pom-poms, and we talk about how that climate on Venus is very different to the climate on Earth. And almost everyone we've interacted with has gone, oh, okay, so we need to stop this happening here on Earth. And it's been a much more subtle way that's been much more well received by our public than kind of forcing them to attend climate things, I suppose. So pom-poms and fish bowls turns out really helpful things. Who knew?
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else want, and we will be including the chat once this all gets uploaded. The chat is just going off, so we'll make sure we get all of that as well. But in sort of the conversations about you know, wanting to find other ways to sort of tangentially get into a climate conversation, to Alan's idea about solutions, then the next question is, well, what are, in the case of like Venus and greenhouse gases and things of that sort, what are other contextual, we'll say astronomically based examples that you've used that will then better help to contextualize the climate issue? Thaddeus.
Yeah, and this actually just came to mind based on a comment Adam made in the chat about the use of the pale blue dot in a show that we used to do that was about one of those scale of the universe shows, you know, talking about how big our solar system is, and then how big our galaxy, and then how about big our universe, and you know, one of those classics. And then I used to kind of fly us back through the cosmos to Earth while playing some of the audio from Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot speech. And, you know, and it ends with this notion of like why we need to protect the planet and how it's the only planet we have. And so that's one of the ways that I've tied in the astronomical subjects, you know, about, you know, working in xenoplanets and all of exoplanets and all of that, and that idea of like there are other worlds out there but they're not really reachable, about how important it is to preserve our home because it's the only one we have, but done in the context of what else is out there.
Thank you. And I wanted to point out something that Susan had just mentioned in the chat about light pollution as an example of something where you don't need full dome video to be able to showcase that effectively, but also how when we talk about light pollution, we can also very much tie it to personal health. And then, of course, as you've probably seen with the title of the town halls, is that while climate is probably the most salient of all of the environmental issues that we can teach in the dome, it is not the only environmental issue. And if people have issues with climate talk, they may have less issues with environmental talk, when they'll have even less issues with personal health talk. And the idea of just be selfish. If you don't have light pollution at your home, you're likely to see a better looking night sky. And that's a good thing, but also has long reaching ramifications. And want to keep everybody kind of front of mind on, yes, like while we're talking climate, the environmental and the other aspects of it that we can use to help sort of slipstream some of that information into a more climate specific conversation is the way to go. Carlos?
I think that have a good story to talk about space and Earth, and is the dinosaur story. It's a beautiful species that have had in the world many times, and the conditions of the Earth changed, and it's all over. I think that it's a good example that the transformation of the environment will transform the condition of life in the Earth. And the same story was replicated many times in Earth in previous extinctions. So I think that it's a good story to emphasize that that change the conditions will change the life in the Earth.
Anyone else? Oh, Anna, back to you.
Thanks. And for some reason, I don't have the option to like do the character hand raise. I don't know why.
It's because you're a host.
Okay, well, there we go. I'm never a host, so. Yeah, on the light pollution topic, I think that's another thing too, is it's a good reminder that light pollution is part of the climate change issue as well, because we don't always necessarily remember that. And that's something we do demonstrate in some of our programs here, just even our live Sky to Night show. And what I found interesting is, so the way we do it was we have everybody take part in it, and we have the stars come out and we go, is this what the sky looks like here in Berlin? No. And then, you know, okay, we're gonna do something we don't usually do in the planetarium. I'd like everybody to take out their cell phones and turn them on and point them towards the dome. And then I make a joke about it looking like the brightest area in Berlin. And then we all have a good laugh. And I'm like, does that look more familiar? And they say yes. And I said, okay. And then we also use that as and now you know what it looks like when all the cell phones are on, and we'll know who it is exactly if you turn it on again during the show. So let's keep those put away until the end of the show. And in Germany, that works. It's very rare that someone takes their phone back out again. I tried it when I went back as a volunteer in my old dome in the United States, and nobody put their phones away. And I have not used it in the United States since. So I think it just depends on your audience, but it's effective. It's really interesting to see people's reactions to getting to do that themselves. And then with, with asking about what other areas in space we talk about, and kind of going back to Venus's atmosphere. We have in our other shows, we actually have a dedicated Mars show in the mobile dome that we do. And we show what we think Mars used to look like with water and an atmosphere and everything. And we talk about like, this could be Earth one day. And we use Mars very much in that program. And then there's another program we do that's kind of a run through the planets, and we still talk about it in that one a little bit too. So we do have elements of climate change through Mars in multiple shows. And also in that program, we look at Venus, and we look at Venus under the clouds, and we talk about the greenhouse effect there too. So we do try to put that into our other shows. And I will say a lot of our shows too, when we end and if we come back to the Earth from somewhere else in space and we look at it, we try to put that there is no planet B, the astronaut overview effect that we have. And, you know, it's our job to take care of this. This is our home. Take care of each other, be good to each other, that kind of thing.
Your point about Mars, and I think the point that other people have made about using Venus and contextualizing, begs a question. Love to hear from all of you if you've had this experience. Is there a difference in the level of acceptance between talking about climate change on other worlds and then getting back to Earth where it is specifically human accelerated climate change? The climate change topic is the same, but the impetus for it, do you have more issues when it's very much front and center that it's human driven, human accelerated, versus Venus just happened to have more carbon dioxide, which means it happens to have more of a greenhouse effect, and it's just gotten warmer, and Mars got colder, and that's just natural. And then the moment that humans get involved, it's somehow like, well, no, climate change can't be real, because then we'd have to have some sort of hand in that. Have any of you experienced a difference in audience reaction based on those two types of climate change narratives? Or it's just a very good conversation piece for like later research and things. So putting it out there if anybody wants it.
I still think that a lot of people don't make that connection, that it's human driven, especially in the United States. Yeah, probably is different in Europe, but maybe somewhat true there too. I don't know, to realize, to actually realize that everything we're doing has an effect.
Yeah.
They
Susan,
don't,
and then
they
Toronto.
they don't want to be to blame. They have guilt aversion. Yeah.
Ryan, up to you.
Ryan, you're muted.
I thought we would just click the ask on there.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I think that someone in the chat mentioned the six Americas. So this has been a kind of a European focused conversation, but in the US, I think there's also the question of like, if you look at the six Americas, most people get it. Most people get it. We know that we know the impact we're having on this planet. And in a lot of these conversations, I think because we're educators at heart, we're like, how do we bring along that difficult last of the six Americas? We're never going to do it. We live in a culture of misinformation. Those folks are going to believe what they believe. And I think we need to focus our efforts on, in the US, the other five, or maybe the four, where we have the potential to affect a change in behavior. And I think, Susan, you made a fantastic point. And in the conversation earlier, we were talking about how I think Mark, you mentioned in Bristol, or sorry, Alan, you mentioned in Bristol, this conversation with kids who are like, hey, what have you done? And you're making us solve the problem. On the flip side, I had the conversations with parents coming to the California Academy of Sciences already predisposed toward both science and toward the environmental messaging that is prevalent in our institution. And to a person, when I talk to parents and sort of a random kind of intercept with people, they're like, oh, my kids are smart, they'll figure it out, it's about the next generation, et cetera, et cetera. And I have to admit that I'm kind of tired of hearing that message, because like, we don't have time for that. We've got to address this issue soon. And so a lot of our effort is really focused on kind of how do we affect behavior change. And going back to your comment, Susan, there's this state of ambivalence, which is actually a very fruitful space to have a conversation. So when you're like, I know my actions are causing, like, and this feeling, the feelings associated with it, I know my actions are causing potentially harm, but how do I change it? How do I, like, having that conversation around how to move from sort of wherever you are to a more constructive place can happen. And I think that planetariums are a really interesting space to activate that kind of thinking. So in terms of what we're talking about a lot at the Academy is that kind of engagement with audiences, and we have not figured this out at all. And we're just really starting to talk about what that looks like in terms of translating these ideas into action. So just to say that's top of mind for me and came to mind as we were talking about some of these other topics.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to give a little bit of their own insider perspective on it? I know we have a noted climate science visualizer in the room today, so. Well, another climate science visualizer. And
Hi, Michael.
hey.
Sorry, I was only able to join late, but glad to be here.
Yeah, so at the very least, we had intended to go about an hour and 15 minutes. For those of you who might be interested, we do have a second town hall a little later today. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Universal, 11 a.m. Pacific, a nice reasonable hour for those there on the West Coast. And we've got Shiloh Fontes from the Philandro Science Center in Arizona, Travis Rector from the University of Alaska, who's also representing Astronomers for Planet Earth, and Kachin Yu from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. They'll be our special guests for the second one, so if you came in a little late to this one, similar conversations, but of course, with a different group of people does mean we will probably go off on different tangents. But if there's no one else that would like to add, I will thank you all for coming out and joining us today. At one point, we were 75% international attendees, which was exactly the point of doing it this early. And again, like as this collaborative group comes together, it's Astronomers for Planet Earth and IPS and the Astronomical Society of the Pacific and its Cal Academy, and these are organizations and institutions that are trying to have a far more global impact. So we're really thankful to get sort of the European and the South American, and again, kind of expanding on what does climate change and environmental issues look like in Asia, and what does that look like in Africa, and what does it look like in other parts of the developing world? But also, how do the countries that have always been the haves and who have likely put a lot of their terrible policies on the rest of the world, how do we rectify that? How do we empower and resource those in those less resourced and empowered areas to be able to speak to their communities and their audiences? So we very, very much appreciate all that. This will end up on the Dome Dialogues YouTube page along with the chat transcript, and we'll continue to make sure that we have as much of these conversations as possible. But the other plug here at the end is that this conversation is meant to be ongoing for this year and next year and the years to come. And with us having a big focus on this, both formally in some of the presentations and informally in the way that we get together at the IPS conference this year. Anna, that's a good segue.
You read my mind. I can't attend anything without plugging IPS 2024. But I do want to say, as part of the abstract committee and reading through almost 200 abstracts, I was very excited to see just how many of them are about what we can do for our climate in varying types of presentations as well, stemming from breakout roundtables and community panels to traditional presentation style and dome presentations as well. So please, I hope you all will be able to make it. I realize Germany's far away for some of you and it's much closer for others of you, but I think there's going to be some really good conversations going on. We're also going to be trying to have some open-ended areas for people to just want to have a chat and bring others in together. We're going to have some rooms available that you can just say, hey, we're going to meet in this room at this time. Let's go have a discussion about it. So this is definitely an ongoing conversation that we hope can be facilitated even more in person at IPS 2024. So please come. Please bring your ideas. Let's solve some stuff as best we can.
Thank you, Anna. And again, thank you to both Anna and Susanne for their insight and perspectives today. If you get the chance, go to Berlin, go to Linz, see both institutions, participate as much as possible. And do remember that being here and being a part of this, you are helping to, at the very least, trying to make the world a better place, and we are deeply appreciative of that. So with that, thank you all for, does Anna have something else to say?
Sorry, I did also want to add, I know that traveling here doesn't help with our carbon footprints if you're taking an airplane, but I did want to say, that Germany has an amazing train system, not necessarily always punctual like people think, that's the Swiss, but it's very comfortable. Michael got to experience it last fall. Very easy, I use it all the time. So if you fly into Frankfurt, for example, please, well, you have to take the train to Jena from Frankfurt. There is no Jena airport, so you have no choice. But I really recommend taking it to Berlin as well. You can usually save money by doing that, and your carbon footprint is much, much less by doing that. So please, please, please consider taking the train. You'll be getting passes as well to be using public transportation in Berlin. So we're trying to, on the sustainability tip, just wanted to throw that in there too.
Awesome. Well, and I will attest to it again. Transportation in Germany was great. Even the 2.5 hours of standing in the food car because a previous train had been canceled, it was still an enjoyable 2.5 hours. Not something you can necessarily say with a United States train. So not to put it down, but Germany much better. The only other thing I can ask and add to this is IPS, of course, is our main conference this year. It is the biggest one. It's our first one in person in 6 years. But we also don't want to forget about the opportunities to have these conversations at regional affiliate conferences. And so here in the United States, of course, we have the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast Planetarium Conference before IPS. Throughout Europe, We do know that the German planetariums will be meeting at IPS, but we have the Italian meeting in April. There's the Association of the British Planetariums, BAP, I believe in September, early September. And then we will have APLF, the French planetariums, later in this year as well. So if you are part of one of these affiliate organizations, if you're going to be at one of these conferences, we want to help resource you as well to be able to get the coordination in place so that we can have conversations wherever planetarians and educators are in one place, and to facilitate this across the entirety of 2024 and beyond. So keep that in mind. If you need anything from IPS, do in fact reach out to me, that is president at ipsplanetarium.org, and be happy to again help pave the way and make this a little bit easier. And then as we have this group together that's continuing to collaborate beyond planetarium lines and getting into this much broader sense of science communication and education, if you want to help participate, if you want to participate or help us with that, do reach out. We have plenty of opportunities for it, and we would love to have you all helping us out there. And once again, Anna and Bjorn Voss of the Hamburg Planetarium, they are the European representatives for IPS. You saw him earlier, but Marco Avalos is our Latin America representative. And I wanted to see if we had anybody else on the board. And if you're interested in anything education related with IPS, as this was one of the initiatives that got brought together, Dr. Jenny Shipway is here as well. And so feel free to reach out to any of us, and again, help to make this a really good and important and ongoing initiative for our domes around the world. So with that, thank you everyone for being with us today, and we'll see you again real soon.